say la, la, la when you're hitting the other sword or the foil, and then you'd say touche if you manage to do well. Now, as you know, you wear a mask when you're fencing, looking a bit like a sieve. And they would take this quite seriously, this mask, because if you didn't have the mask on, you could gouge someone's eye out. And being a school and all that sort of thing, they took that very seriously. So if all you did was you thrust forward, and instead of saying touche, your foil had stuck in the other person's sieve-like mask, that was called an ampang, because clearly you had impinged on them. So this was an ampang, and you were told to go immediately.
Thank you. Alan?
If I cry the words rising butts, one of two images will come into your head, depending on whether you're a sports enthusiast or your fancy is DIY. You will think either of a rugby scrum, or as I can see, possibly even of some other sport, or you will think of a hinge. A rising butt is a hinge. And lots of sorts of hinges, and that's the sort of rising butt we're dealing with today. There's the proud plate and the sunken plate. Wonderful, they sound like names for successful or unsuccessful restaurants. They're two types of hinge. There is the elbow, there is the rankin, and there is the imping. The imping is, although furniture is not as good as it used to be, a concealed hinge. Made two channels, one in the door, one in the frame, sank one plate of the hinge in, the other one sank, and it was concealed. And that's nothing, usually brass, but nothing more or less than a concealed hinge, an imping.
Right, so it's to make fat. It is a fencing term for getting a foil stuck in a mask, or it is a brass hinge. Now, the word's either ampang or imping, and it's Christopher's.
Well, I find the American obesity problem interesting enough and strange enough to come back to. I believe that our political correspondent is talking ingenious tripe. In this case.
That's a horrible thing to say.
And I just don't see Alan Corran, distinguished wit, as being a particularly good carpenter about the house. I may be wrong, Alan. I think that this strange business of making fat has to be impinge or ambangu or whatever it is.
Right, you're accused, Gillian. Your card, please.
Oh, well done.
Well, some of us are rather surprised about that. There it is. Imping is to make fat, after all. And we go on with the score, I might say, 2 to Alan's team and 1 to Sandy's. Lobelin comes up, and it's Clark's.
Lobelin. A lobelin is a female hobgoblin. During medieval times, these female hobgoblins would hide underneath the tables when people were bartering over a pig or over a cat or something like that. And the person who was selling the wares would take it and put it into a bag. And they were tied up. And as they continued to haggle across the table, somebody underneath, the lobelin, or the female hobgoblin, would take out that particular purchase and put in something else. For example, if it was a pig, they would take the pig out and they would put in a little cat so that the bag would continue to move. And so a lobelin is the process of making a switch while the transaction is going on. And what that has to do with a female hobgoblin, I'll leave that to you.
I think we got it, thanks. Chris?
I know that Bob is old enough just to remember the Flower Pot Men. I don't know if anybody else here remembers the Flower Pot Men, which was a few years ago my favourite television programme.
I bet he could do weed, couldn't he?
Yes, I was shaped like weed in the middle, and if you recall, on either side were Bill and Ben, and their favourite expression was, in Ben's case, who was the deep voiced one, he would say, "Oh, lobber lop, oh, lobber lop." And Bill, with the slightly higher pitched voice, would say, "Oh, lobber lop." And it's highly appropriate, actually, why they had to say lobber lop, I don't know, but it's appropriate because a garden is exactly where you would find a lobelin, which is simply a rustic person. That is what a lobelin is.
Thank you. Right. It goes to Sandy.
This is amazing what we get people to do on this programme.
Yes.
I bought a pair of kid gloves the other day, which was incredibly stupid. I should patently have bought adult ones. And they would have fitted. And I showed them to this friend of mine. She's Swedish. She's a little bit grumpy. But I said, what do you think of my new gloves? She said, they're Lublin. And I said, they are nice, but they don't fit. But you see, we were talking, as one so often does with bad-tempered people, at cross purposes. And so she tried to explain herself, and she said they're in fact gants de Suède. And I thought she meant gone to Sweden. So again, we were in a kind of linguistic hell. And it took some time for us to discover that Lublin is another word for suede for undressed kid skin.
Thank you. So, is it the process of becoming involved in the switching of goods at a medieval fair? Is it a rustic person, a boor? Or is it undressed kid skin, suede, in other words? Lobelin it is. Gillian, it's yours.
Well, I'm none the wiser after it all of that anyway. Christopher, a rustic person. No, not you, what you said. Let me think. No, I can't see it's that, something in the garden. Sandy. I'm not sure about the kid skin. I really am not sure. I think I'm going to go with Clark, just because hobgoblin seems to rhyme with lobelin. And that's the reason why.
Right, prove it right or otherwise.
Anything else.
Seems reasonable, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One of the other two, which one is it? Let's see.
Oh, well, I thought...
Well, there you are.
Yeah, I thought, yeah.
Well done. On we go now with Off-Read. John?
Now, I feel a bit of an outsider on this programme, or show, as you call it. You're all sort of show business types. And you're all rather glamorous. And that includes Christopher, of course, because cricketers put on face paint and they'll be wearing tight suits, won't they? So I'm aware of being an outsider, and it reminds me of an arts minister in a previous Labour government called Alma Burke. And she went to a party, a theatrical party, and an actor came up to her and looked her up and down and said to her surprise, "What are you in?" And she said, "I'm in the government." She said, "Oh, how's it going?" So he said, "Oh, it's going well. It'll run and run." Now, that's the trouble about being an outsider. And it was even more difficult when the Vikings invaded, right? Because if you were an outsider then in a warring tribe, it wasn't all easy. Now, as the Vikings came off their longships, they would say, right, let's rape the women, yeah. Let's pillage the village, yep. And let's kill the off-dreed, because the off-dreed were the outsiders.
Right.
So, off-breed outsider.
Yes, fine. Alan?
It's another Anglo-Saxon word. In fact, our producer's getting a bit obsessed with Anglo-Saxon words, and if she doesn't stop it soon, I shall have a couple of Anglo-Saxon words of my own to throw at her. But it may be because she too is suffering from off-trade. Because off-trade is an Anglo-Saxon word for an obsession. Our ancestors were immensely obsessed by everything, by hobgoblins indeed, Clark, by Danes certainly, by things that went bump in the night. It was a very difficult time. There were no torches, they wandered around, and everything that moved or didn't move, tree stumps, anything, bothered them. And off-trade was a compulsive obsession, particularly with that things aren't as they should be, a rather obsession about sinister things, off-trade.
Thank you. Gillian?
Well, in recent years, there's been an awful lot of talk about how the British film industry is going to rise like a phoenix from the ashes. And this is normally based upon the performance of one particular film, I think Chariots of Fire, Four Weddings and a Funeral, and more recently, I suppose, The Full Monty. But this wasn't always... and then that happens until it all goes quiet until another British film does very, very well. And this wasn't always the case, because if you think back some 40 or 50 years ago, there were real British studios making real British films at the time. And you think of Rank, think of Ealing, but also think of Hammer. Because Hammer Films turned out more cheap-rate horror films than Kate Moss has had hot dinners, or cold, come to think of it by the look of that. And the fact that they only had two main actors, that was Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, didn't seem to matter at all, because those two people scared the pants off anybody who went to see them. Because what they did, they just chose to plough one furrow. That was off-dread. Off-dread means to terrify, to frighten.
Thank you. Right, so, is it a warring tribe of outsiders? Is it an Anglo-Saxon word for an obsession? Or is it to terrify and frighten people? Off-dreed or off-braid? It goes to Clark.
Well,
with speed, please.
With speed.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny, I'm not very sorry about the...
Thank you, Clark.
I agree.
I'm not too sure about being terrified. And Alan, for an Anglo-Saxon word, you started to become very French and off-dread. You know,
I'm not very Anglo-Saxon. I tend to speak with my hands a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not too sure about that. You know, but I think I will go with John and it being an outsider. You know, someone who is not part of the situation.
Right,
and
John, show the card, please.
Yes, yes.
No, no. So, again, which of the other two is it? Let's see. Aha, there we are.
Get out of here! Stop yourself!
To terrify and to frighten. Off-dread it was. Right, and with speed this time, and I really mean this, we go to the next one, which is Turpale like lightning. It goes to Christopher.
On the way to a cricket match the other day, I broke down, so there was nothing for it but to wait until some very kind chap came along, and I said, could you possibly give me a hand because my car's broken down? He said, I can't do that, I'm afraid. I'm no mechanic, I'm only a chiropodist. And I said, what sort of things do you deal with? And he said, well, fallen arches and bunions and turpil. And I said, what's that? And he said, that is our term for soft feet.
Sandy.
I've always wanted to do that thing of saying on a stage, is there a doctor in the house? And it happened to me only last week. Unfortunately, I was at a medical convention and half the audience rushed to the stage. The other half stayed where they were because they were in private practice. And I had caused a turpile. It's a melee, a rumpus, a fracas.
Thank you. Clark.
Maurice Turpile was in competition with a lady named Anthea Walker for hair processing processes, like the jerry curl today, where you see the stuff dripping down people's heads. And Maurice felt that if he could find another way to deal with the hair processing situation, which was opposite to the way that Miss Walker was doing it, which was to fry it, Maurice froze the hair. So